welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, every week hosting a conversation with an outstanding business professional. And when they share their communication tips and strategies with us, you and I can learn plenty that will benefit us in our business. It's a great pleasure today to host Dr. Merrianne Dyer. She's a consultant with the Scholastic Incorporated Division of Family Engagement and Learning Supports. She works with school districts and community agencies across the nation to develop family-school community relationships, to address barriers to learning, and to support high school completion. Dr. Dyer holds a Ph.D. degree in education policy from Georgia State University. She has been a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent in the Gainesville, Georgia City School System for 36 years, retiring from that in 2014 and then assuming her consultant's role. I can tell you she's been a very busy lady. I looked at her schedule over the last year on Facebook: Las Vegas, Reno, New York City, Denver, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, and many more. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Merrianne Dyer. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Dyer.
So good to be with you.
Delighted to have you here. One of the things I noticed in reading your bio is that in your career, you have had a special commitment to help students who didn't have the advantages that many other students did. You've had a special affinity for those students, and you've dedicated your career to making sure that they had more than a fair chance. What prompted that with you?
I will have to say, foundationally, growing up, there were some. Our family did not experience poverty, but there was a death and divorce, and some difficult situations in my early childhood. So perhaps the affinities began there when I would see people that were facing, or children facing challenges. But I have to say concretely, my first job as a 13-year-old was with the Girls Club in Gainesville. It was before the Boys and Girls Club consolidated. And I worked there through my first year of college with the Park and Recreation in the Girls Club, and some with the Boys Club at Pine Street Pool, teaching swimming. And that was foundationally what led me into teaching and in teaching in certain environments.
Another point that I noticed was that you were in school systems in times of great turmoil. For example, I know that your first 2 years teaching in Jackson, Mississippi, and Mississippi is my home state, so I know the situation well. The first 2 years you taught there were when court-ordered racial integration took place. And I know that you have an empathy for pulling people together. What were the communication skills and strategies that you employed as a very young teacher in a potentially hostile situation? What were the approaches in communication that you took that brought those groups together who had been separated for many decades?
The book, Everything You Know You Learned in Kindergarten, would apply to my years in Jackson, Mississippi public schools. I had an inspiring principal who modeled those communication and leadership skills during those years, which have stayed with me to this day. He and I communicate still. He's simply the best leader in a crisis situation that I've ever seen. The acknowledgement that it is a difficult cultural transition and was his strength. There was, at that time, a lot of division and violence and other things. And in the school setting, the emphasis in many places was on the technical parts of bringing the schools together, placing the students. He acknowledged that the most foundational strength that we could develop was the understanding that our cultures were different. And he did this with transparency in every day and planning, and for teachers that were white that were coming into the school, giving us a perspective. And he did it in a very caring way. He built relationships of trust between individual people and groups of people. And he did that with communication that was clear. It was concise. It did not try to glorify or paint a better picture than we were facing. And therefore, we built that trust. And when he communicated, we listened, and he could lead so effectively. I've tried to emulate that in the times in my career that I've had, particularly in times of change.
I know very well that from my own hometown, Columbia, Mississippi, which is 90 miles south of Jackson, I know from there that there was a mayor, Buddy McLean, who decided that, yes, we're going to have forced integration, but it's going to go well. And he pulled together the leaders of the community, and he was an insurance salesman before he became mayor, and he did a great job. And what happened in uh, cities and towns and states across the nation, the leadership was important. If the leadership said we're not going to do this, and bucked the trend, bucked the federal regulations, if the leadership said that, there was turmoil, there was disruption. But fortunately, in Jackson, Mississippi, and Columbia, Mississippi, and a number of other places, despite the fierce opposition of even radical groups like the Ku Klux Klan, which you were aware of, which I was aware of, great leadership can solve many problems. Now, this moves me to another major problem that you've been involved with, and it's a long-standing problem. It's not cured, but you have done a great deal to address it, and that is high school dropouts. Anybody who is familiar with the educational system and the life of business know how costly it will be for a student lifelong to be a high school dropout. Tell us, please, the work you have done and the work that you're still doing to address the dropout problem. What are the solutions that are working, and why do they work?
In comparing befores and afters, in the last 10 years, significant work has been done in communities to look at collective impact versus looking at only the impact of a singular school district. For example, in a school district, when you're looking at academics and assessment and testing and parent participation, the systems that are set up they are set up for students that are well supported, that don't come from challenging backgrounds. So if you only look at the systems within a school and their area of influence, you're going to have children that start off with a deficit when they start school that really never goes away. It's the collective impact of partnering with community organizations, with family and youth, with healthcare systems, with colleges and universities, to put together a consistent plan where you all have the same vision of moving children out of your community successfully into the next phase of their life, college, career, military, whatever that is. And the overall role there, as far as communication, is that for collective impact, you have to have a common vision and know your role in the mission. With fragmented communication in communities, as I work around the country, I am so grateful for that, for the presence of that we have in Gainesville and all county, that the communication, once again, building that relational trust between different entities, some competing for the same funding, but leveraging your resources together. And to address dropouts, it's going to take that. A school alone, a teachers alone can't do that.
I'm sure that you have to work also with the parents in this situation. What do you advise parents when you've got a child who possibly has started being absent from school and say they want to drop out? How do you involve the parents in helping on that situation?
Having systems within your school of communication with parents that is open and trustful is the foundational there. You really cannot start a relationship with a parent that is going to be fruitful if you wait until the child is missing school, maybe perhaps engaging in destructive activities. You can work together from that point, but the main focus is promotion of relationships early on that will sustain yourself through any difficult times the child has or the school has. Those early on relationships. But one thing that is important is what is family and parent engagement. Many people look at that as parents that are able to come and volunteer in the school or parents that attend every workshop or function. The research, though, states that the most impactful family and parent supports are: one, getting their child to school; two, talking to their child, reading each day; and three, being sure they're supervised. Those are the most important parental engagement actions, and every parent can do that, regardless if they're working 2 jobs or if they're being raised in a grandparent's home, all of those things. So that particular focus on having them at school regularly, if it started and parents are acknowledged and appreciated for doing that early on, it's a habit. It becomes a habit in a home, just as it is in any home. A challenging home, children can get to school every day. They can reach out to the school for help if they have obstacles to that. But that relationship, and that is basically positive, open communication from the very beginning with the relationship with the family.
Yes, and the thing I often think about on that is that the child, even a high school student, can't see as can't have the perspective to realize the impact of major decisions in their life at that time. They may think they do. In fact, I've often thought, I wish that I knew now as much as I thought I knew
Yes.
in high school and when I
Right.
was 20 and 21. Gee, I wish I knew now as much as I thought I knew then. So it's important for families to recognize, yes, it's okay to be a helicopter parent if that's
Mhm.
what's needed. But most of all, as you're indicating, let the parents encourage the parents to show the value of education to the child. Show that they too enjoy reading and stories and learning. And we've got an old saying that's been around for a long time: it all starts at the top. And that's not just true in corporations, it's true in families as well.
It's true.
Well, tell us about your consulting roles. We've considered some of the emphases that you had as a leading educator for 36 years in Georgia, and now you're taking your skills and your knowledge and your leadership and education, you're taking that around the country. What's your main focus now, Merrianne?
My main focus now is mental health, social emotional supports being woven into leadership plans. And it came out of a grant project Gainesville City had when I was superintendent in partnership with UCLA Center for mental health in schools. And the study was over 4 years and been published after that. What the research question was is that if systems of support that address mental health can help children in crisis, like Hurricane Katrina, which is when our study began, could it not help children whose lives are in crisis every day? That was a research question. And we worked with UCLA. Scholastic Publishing Company funded the study, and that was how their role, and the American Association of School Administrators, which is really the School Superintendents Association. There were 5 districts across the country, and they studied the results of putting in systems of support, which is promoting promoting, addressing the barriers, promotion of mental health, addressing barriers that you have to it, and then building systems that are just the way you do things that do support children. Gainesville City has continued that work. It's morphed into different perspectives. The hub, the center at Gainesville High School, which serves Gainesville and Hall County, is a result of that emphasis on the work. And I'm very proud and happy that the current leadership, Superintendent Dr. Jeremy Williams, has those same values, that this is foundational to learning. I never thought that I would be, 10 years ago, thought I would be doing what I'm doing, but seeing was believing. In my experience as a superintendent, there were 20% of our students that were chronically just underperforming. Those were the ones that some eventually would drop out. And over time of staying the course with our systems of support, began to see that 20% begin to narrow over time. So that's what I do, work with district leaders, state leaders in some cases, and school principals in some cases, on how to set up a system using that UCLA Center for Mental Health framework.
To me, one of the great trends that I've begun to notice just on an informal, anecdotal basis is that there is a willingness and even an eagerness now to, on the part of just ordinary citizens, address the fact that mental health is an issue. I believe in previous decades, it has been something we just didn't want to talk about with children or anybody. But for some reason, I believe, and I'm sure the leadership of the schools, such as Gainesville City Schools under your leadership, I'm sure that has helped people who are not even connected with the school system to understand that mental health is just as much of a need as physical health. And to me, one of the great new movements in society, and I'm speaking just as an observer and not a professional, but one of the great movements is that we recognize that there is a need there and that we should address our resources, our personnel, our families, our institutions, and even wonderful organizations like Scholastic Incorporated towards that.
There's the stigma of mental health that equals mental illness, which most of us, myself included, saw as a problem on the margins. Like we're operating here in our environment, and if people are having mental health challenges, then refer them out to some agency. There are people with significant mental illness that need those services. However, what we've learned in schools across the country is that there are not enough psychologists and professionals and mental health professionals to serve the number of children that we think need mental health services. And when you take a deeper look at that, why are there so many? Why are there too many? It's because the schools and business organizations as well don't recognize that importance of promoting mental health and putting it in to your perspectives and planning and considerations for prevention of people, because everyone will have a mental health challenge at some time. A trauma response, a death, divorce, caring for a parent, illness. Everyone needs mental health and an environment to promote it.
What you just said reminded me of something I came upon, I guess, when I was about 40 years old. I realized then I'd always wondered what maturity is. And then I decided, you are mature when you realize that you too can become a statistic. Early in life,
Yes.
statistics are for everybody else. As you were just mentioning some of them, it's everybody else who's going to divorce. It's everybody else who's going to get cancer. It's everybody else who's going to be in car wrecks. Everybody else who's going to die young. But maturity is when you say, hey, guess what? All those statistics, I could be one of them.
That's a good insight.
Dr. Dyer, this has been a fascinating conversation. I commend you, as so many have commended you, for your great leadership in education on the local level and now on the national level. I know that there are those who have joined us on the Biz Communication Show who want your contact information, so please give that to us now.
Okay, my email is mdyer, Dyer, 2433 @gmail.com. I'm on Twitter @Merrianne Dyer and also LinkedIn.
And I see you're pretty active on Facebook as well.
Yes, try to keep that for social. But
Right. Thank you so much. And now that you've given your contact information, I will give mine, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to visit there. Check my services for corporations and leaders. Give me a call. I would love to talk with you about your communication problems and challenges and how we can find solutions to them. Dr. Merrianne Dyer, any closing thoughts on the topics that we've addressed?
I just thank you for the work you do in the focus on communication. I would say my closing thought is that communication's main objective, effective communication, is establishing trusting relationships, not sharing information as the most important, but establishing those trusting relationships.
That's a fabulous way to put it. Communication should not be just one way. It should be two-way, and that's what brings people together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank those of you who joined us on the Biz Communication Show. We invite you to be with us next week when I have the privilege of hosting another outstanding business professional whose insights, tips, and strategies will help us. Thank you very much.